Crosby is a mystery writer that I have known for longer than she would want to admit. We first bumped into each other down in the Virginia Festival of the Book. She writes 2 different, very wonderful series. And I don't want to tell you too much about her now because we're going to talk about it when I introduce her. So Ellen, if you would join me, please. Let you choose your chair. You like this chair? Hello?
Yes. Isn't that nice?
Nice shoes.
Ruby slippers.
They're not your size. So when we first met, Ellen, I think was very early in the career of the Wine Country Mysteries.
Probably.
They were kind of a new thing. But before that, I believe you were yet one more journalist who's here. You were a reporter, but you were a reporter in the big leagues, Washington Post, ABC Radio News.
Right.
I would call that a level of success, which makes me wonder, what in the world made you decide, no, I'll write fiction?
Well, I'm an accidental journalist, and everything I've done has been sort of an accident. So my husband was a journalist with the Voice of America, and when he went overseas, I was a trailing spouse. I quit my job on Capitol Hill, and I didn't know what to do. So I thought, all right, I know. Why not? You know, how hard can it be? And it turned out to be very hard. And so that was while we were in Switzerland. And then we moved to Moscow, where I got the job as the, I like to tell the story that I got the job as the radio correspondent for ABC News at midnight in my nightgown. So what happened was you worked really, really late in Moscow, and the 2 television reporters were working flat out. It was a really big story. It was the end of the Soviet Union, and they didn't have anybody to do radio. So one of the television reporters said to my husband, they were on the phone at midnight, do you think Ellen would do radio? And he said, I don't know, ask her. So he came into the bedroom, and I got out of bed and walked into the kitchen in my nightgown at midnight. And he said, would you like to be our radio correspondent? So I became the radio correspondent. I said, I don't know anything about it. And he said, oh, don't worry, your husband will teach you. So, so when we came back to the States, I wanted to write about our time in Russia. And I thought it would be nonfiction. And so what happened was there's finally an agent in New York who said to me, honey, every communist, you know, every general, everybody in the Communist Party, they're writing their story. So make it up. So we went to London, which was a great place to learn writing. I took some courses, and I wrote a book called Moscow Nights, which was published in England. And it turned into a mystery, and it was fictionalized. But a lot of what's in that book was lifted from my journal, and that's how I got started.
Wow, that is so different.
It is.
From, I mean, for anybody that doesn't know, the Virginia Wine Country Mystery Series, how many?
I'm writing the 14th.
Okay. It's more of a cozy mystery kind of series, very much tied to the setting. Where did the idea come from?
That's another
for
story.
This? Well, of course, that's why we're here.
So the story for a Virginia Wine Country Mystery came from England. Where else would it come from? So I was in London, and I had written this book on Russia, and so my then British literary agent, we had gone home for the summer, and my husband was French, and so we had lived in Geneva, actually lived over the border in France, and so my husband knew like all the good French vineyards. We used to travel and stop at the vineyards, and so this friend of ours in Virginia said, well, you need to see the Virginia wineries. And Andre said, why? You know, why would you want to do that? So he wouldn't take no for an answer. And so we ended up taking this really idyllic trip through Virginia, which I didn't know very well. We hadn't lived there. And so I just thought it was beautiful. And when I got back, I talked to my agent about it. And she said, that is a great setting for a book. And I said, yeah, I know. And then she said, well, what are you going to write next? And so I said, well, you know, I've lived in all these really cool places. I want to write a book that's with a foreign setting. And she said, I think you should write a book set in a Virginia vineyard. I said, no, I really don't want to do that. And then she said, Ellen, you live in England. Virginia is a foreign setting. thought, well, you can't, and I said, I'll write one, just one. So we came home and I thought, all right, and she said, you're a journalist, you'll figure it out. So I found a vineyard not far from where I live, and I drove out there and I said to the woman who opened the door to me, hi, I'm a mystery writer, I'd like to kill somebody in a vineyard, could you help me? And she said yes. She loved murder, she wrote, and she thought that was a really cool idea, so yes, that's how it happened.
Very, very quickly, I'm curious about the titles. Do you make them up?
Oh, Lord. No. So had I been known that the Merlot murders would spawn all these other alliterative titles, I never would have done that. And what happened was, it was a marketing decision. My paperback, I was at Scribner, and then Pocket acquired my paperbacks, and so it was with Simon & Schuster. And the editorial director at Pocket was my editor. And she said to me, if A is for alibi, B is for burglar, and 1 for the money, 2 for the dough, can work for these other authors, that's your thing. And eventually it came to sort of inform the series, and it just got too hard. And I finally ended up with another publisher, Joe, who said, we don't have to go down that road anymore. So the titles have gradually changed.
But share 2 or 3 of them anyway.
Oh, come on. Well, there's the Bordeaux Betrayal, the Riesling Retribution. There was the Viognier Vendetta, and then when it got to Pocket, the publisher at Pocket said, Middle America is not ready for a book with Viognier in the title. And she said, we're going to call it the Vintage Vendetta, so they changed the title at Pocket. But anyway, it kind of, they've changed since then. The newest one is called Deeds Left Undone, from a quote by Harriet Beecher Stowe, which is, the bitterest tears shed over graves are for words left unsaid and deeds left undone.
Ooh.
Now, I think for a lot of authors, you got a series that's going, people are buying it, they'd have been happy and just settled down. For you, there's the Sophie Medina stuff.
Right.
Still tied to setting, and I do like that, but they are a little different, I think, from the others. So tell folks just a little bit about that series and what is it that separates it from the first one?
Well, I wrote 6 books in this series, and I never expected to write more than one. And it's a small canvas, and it just got harder and harder to play fair with my readers. It's a small town in Virginia. My agent at one point said, if you don't make it bigger, there'll be nobody left to kill after like 2 books. So I had to make it bigger. So I got to the end of 6 books, and I thought, I need to do something different. And I am a journalist. I'm an amateur photographer. So and I've lived overseas, and I've worked as a foreign correspondent. So I wanted to write a book with a foreign setting. So I started this, I wrote about this photojournalist who's based in London, where I live. And she comes back to Washington, and so it was a world that I knew more about. Plus I lived in Washington for a long time. I went to undergraduate and graduate school there. So I wrote 2 books in the series, and then I moved publishers again, and they wanted me to go back to the wine books. And so I went back, and then I wrote 6 more. And then I spoke to my new editor and I said, can I go back to the Sophie books? So I wrote 2 of those. But there've been a really long hiatus between them. So now I'm back to the wine books again.
Is one harder to write than the other, or more fun to write than the other?
No, I think they're different. I think, for anybody out here who's written a series, and I know there are a lot of you, once you've built your world, it becomes a lot easier, in terms, I see people nodding, a lot easier in terms of writing the story. So I think, just keeping it fresh, keeping it interesting, that's sort of a little bit more of the challenge, I think, especially as you get deeper and deeper into the series. I mean, one thing I decided to do, after I saw what happened with Michael Connelly, is, he finally aged out Harry Bosch. I've been writing these for 20 years. She's only a few years older. So that got a little tricky.
Okay. The follow-on, of course, now that you're back to being in the vineyard, is it hard at all to shift gears between this world and that world from the one series to the other series?
No, pardon me. I think it was refreshing to have that break. I think to step back, and then I sort of come at it with a fresh view. There's especially like, for example, in the wine world, one of the things 20 years ago was very different from now. hey, climate change, all of a sudden, there's the books that I'm writing about now are much more about climate change and, what's happening to our food supply and that sort of thing. So it's very different from what I wrote 20 years ago. And in Virginia alone, I mean, look at what's happened with the Confederate monuments that come down. There's a lot, it's a very different world, so that's been kind of a lot to take into consideration.
You've been doing this for a couple of years.
Yeah.
What'd you say, 13, 14 wine?
14.
14 wine
The
novels?
first one came out in 2005, and I was writing it in the late 90s, so.
And if I'm listening well, 4 of the Sophie Medinas
Right.
so far.
Right.
The odd standalone.
Moscow Nights was the only standalone, yes.
Okay. You're pretty prolific, I think.
Thank you, thank you.
Are you ever stuck for an idea for the next mystery?
No, not really. I mean, for me, I pull them out of, something I've read or something I've seen or some notes I've taken or somebody I've talked to or something like that. And they just, I think anybody here who's a writer, if you aren't carrying around a notebook, I'm always carrying around a notebook. I'm always writing things down. And you save string and, you sort of get your ideas.
They just come to you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Tell us a little bit about your process, your writing process.
Wow. It's sort of evolved over the years, but I'm a plotter. I talked about this morning, if anybody came to the panel this morning, but I took a course in London a number of years ago with Robert McKee, he was called Story Structure. It was, everybody's nodding. I took a course with him. It was fabulous. Yeah, this would have been in the mid-90s. And it was a 3-day course. We analyzed Casablanca, and I learned about writing in scenes. And what happened was I was writing Moscow Nights, and it just wasn't going anywhere. So I came home, and I just got a pack of note cards, and 3x5 cards, and I wrote every single scene on my 3x5 card. And I realized I had way too much slow stuff in there. And I pulled out every card with the slow scene, bunched them together, and the book took off.
That is a good plan, yes. So I know there's somebody out there who wants to get started writing a good mystery novel. So I'm going to ask you if you have one piece of advice, one signal piece of advice that you could give that budding writer, what would that be?
Finish the book.
I'll hear that. Yes. Okay, we've got a couple of minutes. If anybody has a question that they would like to ask of Ellen. Of course, I realize we've told you everything you ever needed. There's a young lady there in the back of the room.
Oh, God bless you, young lady. My question is, I have a series where they're in a particular setting, my protagonist. I wanted to go on a trip, okay, in the next story. But my readers love the area that she's in. So what do you suggest as handling her no longer being with her best friends?
I got a lot of pushback on that when I got a lot of pushback when I did that. I moved it partway to California for half of it, and another one I moved a little bit to Washington, and people didn't like it. But I say write the book you want to write. I mean, if you can sort of tie it to that world, but I would expect people to be not happy. That's what I had.
Will be disappointed, right?
Yeah. I remember one time, John, you remember the story, Jeff Deaver talked about when he wrote, the first time he wrote the first James Bond book, and he said, I'm never doing it again because my fans want, they want Lincoln Rhymes. They don't want me to be writing that book. Remember that? Yeah. John, all the way in the back over there.
We all know about the problems with artificial intelligence. Has it in any way been useful for you?
My oldest son is really into AI, and he actually went on AI and asked him about my books, and it came back with a whole big questionnaire, like a deck of cards or something, and it was all questions based on my books, so I know I've been mined. And I thought, wow, that was really interesting how they picked out each one of my books and had questions on it, and it was a little bit creepy. They did say nice things about me, which was nice. But no, not yet, and I don't know that I would. I'm like you, John. I'm an old-fashioned journalist. I mean, I'd like to do the research and I find something out for myself.
Who are you calling old?
Old-fashioned.
I'm curious, and this has nothing to do with our actual interview, but how many journalists or retired journalists are in this room right now? Yeah. These are the people who really understood how to tell the facts and then realized that being stuck with reality was boring. I think I can get one more question in. Oh, so yeah, two people sitting at the same, yeah, go ahead.
My question is, as a former journalist and now writing science fiction and fantasy, I was wondering, what would you advise for former journalists and writers writing fiction in terms of revision, editing, especially since I don't really have a background too much in editing? What are your thoughts on that?
I think as a journalist, you've got a lot of really good, you've got a really good skill set, and I think, everybody needs an editor, so I think you need to show it to somebody who can edit it. But I think journalists, we have a habit of finishing things, we end up right under deadline, we know what, we know word limit and all that. You've got a really good skill set. So, find somebody to edit it for you, because nobody should be their own editor. Do the best you can, but then find somebody else to edit it for you.
Thank you.
I think we're gonna,
I have one more thing to
oh,
say.
hold on.
So I would like to say that the Wine Country series, I'm going to sign a contract. I've actually been paid for an option for a television series. Option, which doesn't mean anything. It means walk away.
It means you got paid a little bit.
I did get paid.
In the business, I think that's referred to as burying the lead. But,
Thank you.
that's okay. Thank you so much. That was a great